Now, you and Nassim Harriman have completed research from Mesoamerica that uncovered evidence of advanced civilizations that visited the Earth. Can you share about your discoveries and the implications when you consider our own human evolution and our daily lives? And I'm sorry, that's kind of a lengthy question, but I'll even
There's
throw in
three questions in that question.
Yeah, and here I've got to throw in a fourth. What the heck am I doing anyway, Steve? Is you were sharing with me something I didn't know, which was that when we talk about extraterrestrials, there could be another dimension to that, which is fascinating, really.
Yeah. So let me begin at the beginning. Nassim and I are working together. What many people don't know is that we have worked together, and when this recording is being made, it is the summer of 2021. It happens to be our 30-year anniversary of the day that we met and began working together. 30 years. We met in a little town in northern New Mexico, and began working to unlock some of the deepest mysteries of our existence, pretty much for the same reasons, because we both recognize that we're living this rare and precious moment in the history of civilization and the history of our time when new ideas are now being accepted more readily than they have been in the past, because the world is changing and the old ways of thinking are breaking down. They're not solving the problems for us. So when it comes to our common themes, Nassim and I are both scientists. We are looking at current science, but we tend to see a continuity in terms of civilization and humankind. And that involves the archaeological discoveries that help us to recognize that continuity. So through the Mesoamerican sites that we've had the opportunity to work with, there have recently been a series of new discoveries that have been surfaced. Over 4,000 archaeological relics. So they are separate from one another, but they are all depicting common themes. And those common themes are a relationship between the people of the earth and the people of the stars in many, many different levels. Accompanying these depictions is a script. I'm not going to say an alphabet because we believe it is not an alphabet. It is a script that has never been seen before, that predates even the earliest writing known to humankind. And we're also actively working to unlock the secrets of this script so that we are very clear about what is being depicted on the artifacts themselves. What we are seeing clearly are replicas of our solar system in such precise detail. The planets are accurate in terms of their size related to one another, in terms of their orbits, the size of their orbits, the distance between the planets. Rings on Neptune and Jupiter, which we did not even know about until the 20th century. The asteroid belt is certainly depicted in these, and some of the artifacts depict our solar system not from the sun out, but from the cosmos moving in, as if you were coming in from outbound, inbound. So when you look at these unto themselves, of course, they are subject to interpretation, but when you put them into context with evidence that we now have, the biological evidence of an intervention when it comes to the human genome, what scientists are telling us very clearly is that we're the product of genetic mutations that happen quickly. They happened very close to the same time that we emerged, 200,000 years before present. Scientists agree on that date. Human chromosome number 2, for example, that is responsible for a brain size 50% larger from our nearest primate. The uniquely human abilities of empathy and sympathy and compassion and the ability to self-regulate our biology all come from human chromosome number 2. Who or whatever is responsible for that, it is not the product of natural evolutionary processes. And the proceedings from National Academy of Sciences have said that very, very clearly. We don't know what it is from. We know it's not the product of a natural evolutionary process. And if that were the only mutation, we could say maybe it was a rare anomaly, but there are other genes that have equally mysterious mutations. They all occurred 200,000 years ago. These artifacts are depicting birthing scenes between humans and beings from somewhere. and not of Earth. But what Steve now is referring to is there is a new body of evidence suggesting that some of these, at least some of them, when we think of extraterrestrial, we think of other worlds. What the artifacts are depicting and what some of the other studies now have indicated is that the beings are not from another world, but they're from our world in another time, in our future. And that they have made contact with people of the earth at this time because we are in a very, very crucial time in our evolution where we're making the choices in terms of technology and how we embrace that technology and how much of that technology we embrace into our bodies or even to replace our bodies, the merging of artificial intelligence and biology. And what they're saying is that they made those choices and they resulted in unsuspected and in some cases unknown results where they lost some of the capabilities that we still have, and they are us inviting us not to make those choices again. That's a huge concept. It's a mouthful, and I wanted to answer your question. So the archaeological evidence is one piece. It's a facet that supports the cultural evidence almost universally. The indigenous traditions tell us. Not one indigenous tradition tells us that we're the product of a random mutation. They all tell us that we're the product of some kind of an intervention. Now, I'm a scientist, and as a scientist, I cannot tell you precisely what that intervention is. As a scientist, I can tell you the evidence strongly supports some kind of an intervention rather than a random process that scientists call lucky biology. So we have the cultural evidence, now we have the genetic evidence. And Steve, this is so amazing. We now have the technology. We can extract DNA from the fossilized remains of ancient forms of life that we used to believe we have descended from, compare their genome to our genome, and that evidence, that is rock solid science, and it's telling us we did not descend from Australopithecus. We didn't descend from Neanderthal. We have shared DNA, which means we may have a common ancestor, but we didn't descend from them. In many cases, we shared the earth with them. So the bottom line is the archaeology is supporting the new discoveries that are revealing a new human story. And that's really what Nassim and I are working on. It's the science that is helping us to come to terms with the potential within each of us to navigate the changes in our lives and our world in a healthy way. And what the science is revealing is that we're not what we've been told, and we're much more than we've ever imagined. So that's where we're going with this.
Yeah, boy, and no kidding. I mean, talking with the specifics of what you just shared, holy cow. So Carl Sagan said we're made of stardust, and that kind of is maybe one dimension of it. But then the science fiction, I'll almost call it, because we've seen movies like this, of something in our, this is certainly talking to our limitless nature, because if it's our future self coming back, that has all kinds of implications.
Steve, there's an emerging philosophy in the scientific community. Let me just share this philosophy, and then I'll unpack it briefly, is that consciousness informs itself through its creations. So the things that the books that we write, the poetry, the sculpture, the art, the music, that we think are diversions, they may be, but they're also telling us something about ourselves. This principle goes to the movies that we create, and you look at the movies that have been blockbuster hits recently. I'm not saying every detail is perfect, but in general, what are the themes? The Matrix told us that we're part of a world that we can't see, that influences a world we can see, and now we know that that's true. Inception told us about the ability to dream within dreams and lucid conscious dreaming. Business deals were done in the dreams. Avatar told us about our relationship to the natural world. And many of these now are telling us that we, especially young people, are really drawn Wonder Woman and the Avengers and all these movies about superpowers because they speak to us. And they say, maybe there's something within us that's untapped, that's unrealized. And maybe it is that something for the first time that helps us to know what it means to be human and to express our deepest humanness fully, precisely now at the time when we need that humanness to navigate the waters, the uncharted waters of this tremendous shift that we see ourselves going through socially, politically, economically. technologically, of course.
Wow. So now Nassim Harriman, who's partnered with us on this program, he's brought in this notion of a resonant field, and you together have stated, well, the resonant field is in you. Now, what does that mean, Gregg, and how do you access it?
I'm going to begin that. I'm going to answer that with a quick story. In 2008, I published a book. It took me almost 20 years to write this book. It was called The Divine Matrix. It was a very healing book for me to write, Steve, because it was an opportunity for me to put in concisely into a book what so many people had asked me about all those years. Are we connected, or are we separate from one another? Are we connected to the earth? Are we separate? Is there a field that underlies all existence? Well, that book in 2008 was considered fringe, and it is today required reading at university, some university course. There's a university course called Science and Society, or Physics and Society, and they use this as the foundation. We've come so far in this brief period of time. Scientists now know there is, in fact, a field. But this is where it gets really interesting. And even today, Steve, I go to science conferences and hear these very well-known scientists, and they're on the stage. There is a field out there that connects all things, and their hands are doing this because they're still separating themselves from the field. And here's what Nassim meant, and it was the reason that we have done so much work together. Scientists tell us we have about perhaps 50 trillion cells in the average human body, give or take. And with every one of those 50 trillion cells, there's 100 trillion atoms at least. And this is where the field comes in, because every one of those atoms is emerging from that field and collapsing into the field in a constant dance. This is you and I recreating ourselves from the field. The field's not out there. We are the field. We are disturbances. It's not very romantic to say that, but we're wrinkles. Our consciousness creates this wrinkle in the field that's Gregg for whatever period of time I'm here, and I am holding that form in the field. I am the field, you are the field. And this is where the physics is so interesting, because when we understand the principles of that field, what we're really understanding is the rules and the guidelines of our lives and our potential and our capabilities. So what are those? Well, we know, number one, that the field is entangled. We know that all matter in the universe was once connected, and even though physically the universe is expanding and separating, energetically we're still connected, number one. Number two, the universe is holographic. This is such a powerful, I can't even do justice to it in this brief conversation, but what it means is in a true hologram, every piece of the hologram has information about the rest of the structure. So I talk about this often in workshops. Remember 1980s? The New Age began, and there were these shiny little bookmarks, holographic bookmarks of like the Great Pyramid or dolphins jumping over roses or something. And if it was a true holographic bookmark, you could cut that into a million pieces and take the smallest and look at it under a microscope, and you would see the whole image, because every piece has information about that whole. So you and I reflect that. Here's how you know that. If there is a change in the DNA in your body, if you take an antibiotic, take a shot for an antibiotic, if your body had to absorb that antibiotic one cell at a time for 50 trillion cells, and it took 1 second right there. So 50 trillion seconds, it would take forever for you to do that. But it doesn't, because your body is holographic. The other principle is that we are fractal. So fractal patterns, there are small patterns that repeat the same pattern on larger and larger and larger scales. So an atom are things moving around the nucleus that are very similar to planets moving around the sun. They're very similar to a solar system moving around the galaxy, same pattern but different scale. When we begin to understand how these principles work, they are informing us of our potential in life. And this is one of the places where my work with Nassim has really overlapped, and we've arrived at some very empowering techniques, very empowering understandings of who we are in our relationship to the world.